Today, Justice Minister Helen McEntee will formally launch the Dublin North Inner City Local Community Safety Plan, which aims at tackling antisocial behaviour in the capital. Among the recommendations in the 50-point plan include more community safety wardens, regular audits of streetscapes and new programmes for young offenders, and also preventative measures as well. After a spate of high-profile assaults, will this bring back a sense of law and order to Dublin's inner city? Well, we're joined in studio by Senator Barry Ward, Fine Gael Justice Spokesperson and Vice Chair of the Oireachtas Justice Committee, by Richard Guiney, CEO of Dublin Town, and on the line we are joined by Brendan O'Connor, President of the Garda Representative Association. We'll go to Brendan first. Brendan, good morning.
Good morning, Pat.
What do you make of what you know of the plan so far?
Well, from what we know of the plan, and we're relying on media reports, is, look, we will welcome anything that augments or supplements or enhances policing in anywhere in the country, and we would hope that that would be the case, and it does acknowledge the multi-agency requirement. But we would be very cautious of the notion of community safety wardens. We don't know what they are, and we would say there is no substitute for well-resourced, properly equipped and trained policing presence on the streets. So certainly we think that's what's missing, and we believe that this will not provide an alternative for what has been lost in relation to visibility and numbers within the North Inner City, and particularly around the city centre. So it's a guarded welcome of a move towards it, but of course one of the other big issues for our members is all other services, state agencies operate on 9 to 5, so everything will fall back on the Gardaí. So until we have sufficient resources and sufficient personnel within these areas, we would see limited success in these plans. But certainly there hasn't been a consultation with, we often hear about stakeholders, the men and women who I represent who deliver frontline policing in the city centre. We don't get consulted on these things, and many members will wake up this morning and are hearing the prospect of someone who perhaps is taking some of the responsibilities of Gardaí on, and again, no consultation and no information provided to us. So that's, I suppose, indicative of the environment that we have found ourselves in recent times, and perhaps contributing to the sort of industrial relations issue talk about, and the sense of unease and disillusionment among our members, and in fact maybe a disconnect. But as I say, we haven't seen the report in its entirety, so we will reserve our position. And
obviously the job description of the community warden would be quite important. I mean, they will not be carrying pepper spray. They will not have powers of arrest. So to get any of the jobs done that need to be done in dealing with the couriers or aggressive begging or whatever, they will always have to call on a guard, won't they?
Exactly, and that's the experience internationally. And unfortunately, the government and Garda managers have sought other initiatives in the past, and we reserve a right to be cynical, but we would call it provide policing on the cheap. And we see people leaving the Garda Reserve in their droves. There's no appetite really for anybody to join up the Garda Reserve. So these initiatives and this pursuit of alternatives to proper policing have failed in the past, and we've no doubt they will fail in the future.
Is this idea of the community wardens, is that a poor man's Garda Reserve?
Well, that's, as I say, we have to reserve our position until we see the details, but certainly what has happened in the UK, that's what it is. And, as you say, if these people who are involved in antisocial behaviour and are willing to assault Gardaí, who have pepper spray and who have batons and have handcuffs, what hope for someone without that equipment or that level of training, who is going to be out there and be possibly an agent of the state? But again, I'm talking blind here. We haven't seen the details, but certainly we would urge caution in relation to any alternative for law enforcement than on Garda Síochána and properly trained sworn members in their uniforms, visible in communities. And we were in a position to provide good quality community policing in the North Inner City, very successful initiatives like the late night football tournaments, engaging with communities, engaging with young people who are on the fringes and in danger of falling into committing offences. So, and as we see with the shortfall in numbers and even in the change in rosters in the coming weeks, we actually see that community policing units are under threat to have personnel reallocated to core response policing. So all these things, the initiatives that are in this report and the aspirations, the reality on the ground on how Garda Síochána has been managed and how resources have been allocated, there seems to be a slight contradiction. So, but as I say, we need to read the report in its entirety. But again, we reserve our position on it.
There's no doubt that Garda visibility on the street is reassuring. I was in Dublin city centre 2 nights ago, and I was heading for a taxi rank on St. Stephen's Green, and I was reassured to see a whole group of Gardaí at the top of Grafton Street. I think the so-called paddy wagon, the public order unit might have been there as well, a van, in the pedestrian area. Now, the Gardaí were dressed, they had kind of the combat boots and the trousers tucked into the boots and all of that. And I felt reassured. Now, they were eating ice cream cones. I don't begrudge them that, because they're entitled to their break, just as the public order units in Paris can have their Gauloise if they want to take a short break. But it was reassuring to see them there, even if they'd nothing to do. And if something happened in Temple Bar, they would be there in a jiffy. And that was reassuring. And, all sorts of people coming and going. And you could feel, quite relaxed in that environment. So anyway, Brendan, it's a wait and see, devil in the detail.
Absolutely. That's our position on the report from what we've heard to date. But certainly we would see there is no alternative for proper policing, something that will complement policing, and additional services made available to support our members out of hours would be great. But unfortunately our experience time and time again is that everything is left on the door of the Gardaí, and unfortunately it's less Gardaí, not more Gardaí, and this initiative is light on detail.
All right, Brendan, thank you very much for joining us. Brendan O'Connor, President of the Garda Representative Association. So, Senator Barry Ward, what is this? I mean, I'm looking at the plan and there is a lot of kind of ambition there. But, what will catch the public imagination are these wardens.
Well, yeah, and the first thing to say about them is that they're not a substitute for guards. They can't be, and it's not intended that they will be.
What will they do?
Well, the idea is that you have people from the community who know the area, who know the people in the area, who will be available as an extra set of eyes and ears for the guards, to assist the guards, to feed information into the guards, to be a conduit for information, and to be a liaison with the guards as well. And you could certainly see a circumstance, for example, where somebody from the community who might have had dealings with the guards in the past might be much more comfortable speaking to a neighbour or somebody from their community than they would be going straight up to a guard who they don't know, or maybe who they've had dealings with in the past. So rather than pour cold water on this, I think this is actually a very clever initiative. It's a measure that involves the community in the very policing we're talking about. And, I'm sorry to hear what Brendan said about resources, because one of the whole reasons behind what Minister McEntee has done is about getting more guards on the street, which is why she secured money in the budget last year for more civilian staff to be in Garda stations to allow guards.
No, but taking people out of community policing to put them onto the responsive front line.
But that is, as I said, and the other thing this was secured in the budget last year was more Gardaí itself, and we will see over 800 new Gardaí being attested this year. She's also secured over €10 million for overtime for Gardaí in Dublin, for example, so that they can be out on the beat where they are needed. And the reality is...
But I'm getting mixed messages here, Barry, because on the one hand, they're all saying, well, look at the stats, Dublin is safer than the media would like to have you believe, and yet we're piling in the resources, 10 million euros worth of overtime.
Yeah, there are two issues, though. There are two issues. First of all, you're right. Dublin is safe, statistically safe, but that's no comfort to somebody who's been the victim of crime, a business who's been the victim of shoplifting, an individual who's been assaulted or robbed or whatever it is. What's most important is that people feel safe. And that's what this is a response about. In the plan that was published by Ministers Donoghue and McEntee this morning, there are two strands, really. One is about policing. It's about more visible policing. It's about more present policing. It's about more effective policing. But the other strand has to also be to work with the community. And that's what the community wardens are part of. But it's also about providing supports for communities that are historically disadvantaged. And it's not an accident that people from certain communities tend to come before the courts more often. It doesn't mean they're more criminal. It just means that they have been the victims of disadvantage and a situation where there are people in their community who drive them into criminality. And it's about addressing that at the very core.
Some of the texts come in. I know areas in Dublin where it would not be a good idea to be seen to be someone who's passing information on to the Gardaí.
Yeah. And
so where are you going to get your recruits from if you're going to be viewed as a tout by the...
It's not about touting. It's about being a liaison with the Gardaí. It's about being a member of the community, a trusted person, a person people they can feel they can talk to, who can then transmit that information to the Gardaí with the approval or whatever way it is. I mean, that's something that will have to be managed, obviously. But it's not about setting up a network of telltales. That's not what it's about. It's about a network of community conduits, community activists, people who know their neighbours, who can also talk to the Gardaí at an official level, not through a back channel, but an official level.
But I mean, the idea of a warden is that they're actually out on the streets. I mean, it appears the brief might be to help tourists find their way around the place, to spot people who are littering.
I'm sure they can do that too. But what I'm saying really is that the value of these people is that they know the people they are who are in their community, and they can talk to the Gardaí, they can help the Gardaí, because very often dealing with crime is not about cracking down and arresting and prosecuting and throwing in jail. It's about stopping. It's about identifying where a problem is. Maybe there's a particular area that needs, and Dublin City Council, I think, has a huge role here in terms of dealing with antisocial behaviour and things like that. Identifying an area, saying Garda who or superintendent, so ever, there's a problem in this particular street, there's a problem in this particular park, here's how we can solve it, and providing the Gardaí with the necessary information that you won't have unless you're part of the
Now,
community.
one of the things they talk about is drugs dealing, black spots, and people who are shooting up in places. And I mean, in fairness to the guards around the Temple Bar area, maybe Richard can back this up, that they do attempt to go to areas where they know there will be needles hanging around and where there'll be people shooting up, and try to clean them up. But no sooner did they do that than the people just move to a different spot.
I mean, it was ever thus with policing.
I mean,
crime.
you practice in the forecourts, and all you have to do is cross the bridge at Merchants Quay, and you can see them openly dealing on that bridge, which is a scandal.
You will frequently see the guards on that bridge as well, but that's the way it is. It's that broken window theory that if you don't repair it, if you don't put it in a way that discourages criminal activity, it'll happen and it'll get worse. So that's why Garda presence is so important.
I'll come back to Brendan on that idea of tackling black spots, but I want to hear from Richard Guiney, first of all, the CEO of Dublin Town. Richard, what do you make of this latest initiative?
I think it's very welcome, Pat. I think the community safety partnership process is an important one. It is bringing people with responsibility. So, for example, Tusla are there, the Liffey Drug Project are there, ourselves, Jerry Farrell from our office representing the business community, the Gardaí. It's a good, solid initiative, and the community safety wardens are a part of that. They're a manifestation on the street.
How do you see them working?
Well, they are actually employed directly by us with funding from the Department of Justice, and
you do the job spec. So what's the job spec?
So they will be, a lot of the things that you mentioned, they will be engaging with people that they meet on the street. They will be providing support for tourists. They will be providing support for Dubliners. They are not Gardaí, absolutely not Gardaí. They will be engaging with people who have vulnerabilities. They'll be advising them of the services. And there's a lot of services that people are not aware of in Dublin City. For example, the Liffey Drug Project is a walk-in service. So if somebody has a drug vulnerability, they can just walk in there and say, "Give me help, please."
No, but suppose a community warden sees aggressive begging. What does that community warden do?
Well, look, they can engage with people on the street, and they've been trained to do that. But they will also, there will be a liaison with the Gardaí, but that is not, their sole function. They, as Barry was saying, even within the business community, sometimes people are more comfortable speaking to ourselves rather than the Gardaí directly, so we can get a picture of what's happening on the street. But I mean, do they patrol? Yes, they will be on the streets.
Okay, but it's a bit, if you don't mind me suggesting this, it's a bit like having a dog and having to bark yourself. No, in other words, you have a warden, but to get the bark, you have to call the Gardaí.
I mean, the system has worked very well in Derry. We had an ambassador crew before the pandemic who would have done a lot of the same kind of functions. There are people in these in similar roles across the United States. They're not Gardaí. They have a very broad engagement with people on the street. So, it's either advising them of things they can do or, assisting them if they're lost or whatever it might be. But also there is this element where, they are a reassurance on the street and they can engage with people who have vulnerabilities. And I think that is for me, is going to be a really important part of their overall work. How
do you mean engage? Engage with whom? I mean, I can understand a tourist saying, I'm looking for the Little Museum of Dublin, where do I go? That's fine.
But also people who have vulnerabilities and advising them where they can go, for example, to get a meal or avail of drug services that are there for them. There's more than enough beds for people who are homeless on Dublin streets. So again, working with the DRHE, the Dublin Regional Homeless Executive. So there's a very positive and constructive aspect to what they're going to be doing. And I think, if we're going to, as Barry was saying, like statistically, our stats are good in terms of safety, but people don't feel safe. And there are issues that we absolutely need to address. And we can only do that, I think, through engagement of all the
there's
various
video
partners.
Online which you've probably seen of the delivery guy being beaten over the head by guys who are trying to rob his bike. Yeah. What would a community warden do in that situation?
Well, I think you do cross into a position where you are there's a Garda function, and these folks are not going to be Gardaí. So let's be honest about that. They are part of an overall solution. But they are not going to be Gardaí. But we're not going to solve all of the city's problems with Gardaí alone. There's a responsibility, I think, for all of us, including the business community, to address some of the issues that we have in Dublin and indeed other cities around the country. And be very constructive in our engagement, so that we are sharing data, we are sharing our various supports, so that we can help vulnerable people and the general public who are using Dublin
Is
City.
that any clearer for you, Brendan O'Connor, President of the Garda Representative Association, what they might be doing?
It is reassuring to know that no function that is currently carried out by the Gardaí would be outsourced to people who are employed by another service. But we can't get away from the conversation, and we understand that the issues that lead to poverty and crime and disadvantage are multi-agency. But the problem in Dublin city centre is the perception of safety, and that comes down to law enforcement and the Garda presence, as you alluded to yourself, Pat. And unfortunately, we have seen the situation where the existing resources within the city are no longer capable of providing a police service. We need initiatives. We need to bring guards in from the suburbs, from surrounding counties, and we need these initiatives and extra funding, and we need to ask our people to come in their time off to work extra hours of overtime. So, unfortunately, and we talk about, people who need services and interacting with the community wardens. That's what community guards do. They know their beat. They walk the same street every day. They get to know the shop owners. They get to know the people who maybe are disadvantaged and are having other issues in relation to maybe homelessness or drugs, and they can provide information and they develop trust. So we, as a police service, have a proud tradition of providing a quite a unique policing service, and we interact. And it's interesting to hear all these initiatives, but no one is actually saying, well, where are our guards? We have guards, we have unprecedented funding and investment and supposedly technology. So why isn't that manifesting itself in a better service and the guards we have been on the street?
Now, we shouldn't knock everything before it starts. We should give it some sort of a fair run to see whether it works and improve things. But Barry, this is like, a minister, cutting the tape on the beginning of construction of the bridge, and then cutting the tape when it's named, and then cutting the tape when the first lorry rolls across it. This has been announced before, community wardens.
No, well, I mean, if you look at Minister McEntie's approach this time last year, she was securing more money for more guards, more money for civilians to work in the Garda Síochána free.
No, but I've heard about these community wardens before.
No, but I mean, this is a whole plan. The community wardens, as you said, it might be the most newsworthy part of the programme, but there is a whole raft of measures within this programme. It's a comprehensive programme. As I said, there's two primary strands. One is policing, but the other is community activity to ensure that people in that community are not left behind, that there are facilities there, there's information, there's supports there from a whole raft of agencies, from Tusla to the HSE to Dublin City Council and all the other agencies that are there. So this is different. It's not just about community wardens. That's just one part of it. It's a response by the government to exactly what Brendan has said there and what Richard has said. It's about people feeling safe. It's about people having confidence that if something happens in the city centre, there will be a support there, and confidence that there are Gardaí close by and that there are all kinds of other support mechanisms.
Just to give you a flavour of what our listeners are saying, I cannot believe these proposals from our Justice Minister. What world does she live in? We need proper policing in a city like all other European cities. This is harebrained. The Gurriers in Dublin have no respect for the Gardaí. This one, oh my God, it's like George Orwell in 1984. They say Dublin is safe, therefore it's safe. But we all know it's not safe. Not all crime is reported. I've never heard anything so ridiculous in my life about safety in Dublin. That's from Linda. I left school in 1984. I read in the evening press soon after leaving school that there was a plan to move Gardaí doing clerical work in stations back onto the streets. And every couple of years this plan is re-released. The fact is the majority of Gardaí working in Garda stations are suffering from mental and physical health issues and will never be available to be street Gardaí. I know this because some of my friends are currently Gardaí. Was in Munich city centre last week, spotlessly clean, no aggressive begging, no homeless, no menace, lots of police with guns, lots of families enjoying themselves, as far removed from Dublin as you can get, a real eye-opener. Another one about a European city. I was in Bruges for the last 2 days. The city was safe and clean and everyone so respectful. I won't go near Dublin as it is rough and dirty, so says Mary in Meath. And many people saying there's absolutely no chance that people are going to be passing on information to the Gardaí without being labelled as touts. No amount of special training in finger wagging can make these wardens effective. Basic fact, The fear of the law is the beginning of wisdom, so says Patricia. Another one, it's very naive to imagine areas with criminal cultures for decades will suddenly be amenable to community policing. So, gentlemen, final comments.
Well, look, I think this is part of the solution. There are unfortunate things happen to people in other cities. A colleague of mine was in Berlin. He was hit over the head. He was knocked unconscious, and his possessions were taken from. These things happen in other cities, but we do need to address the underlying issues in Dublin, the social issues, and I think this partnership is part of that process.
Barry?
It's not going to be a sudden solution. The caller there who said that they're not suddenly going to respect the law, I mean, he's right. What this is about is, as I said, two strands: policing on the one hand, which will enforce the law properly, but on the other hand, dealing with the problem on an ongoing basis so that we can start to change the culture that may be there, so that we don't have this on an ongoing basis into the next generation.
Brendan?
Yeah, look, we welcome the initiative and hopefully it will bear fruit, but we would say use the guards you have more effectively, listen to them, they can tell you why they're not on the streets and what they need to be more effective. Garda management can need to engage with us, and we are the number one stakeholders. No one knows more about police in city centre than the women and men I represent, but unfortunately no one wants to listen to our voice, which is so ironic.
All right, we leave it there. Thank you, one and all.